Good morning. My name is Bob Kovac. I'm with Mobius Vendor Partners and CustomerCount, and the host of the Bobcast. I bet you can figure out why we call it the Bobcast. So today, this wonderful day in March, early March, cold early March in Indiana, I am talking to, and you have the opportunity to talk to Jenny Vance, who is a consultant, professional consultant with a new consulting firm, but not her first time, called Jenny V Consulting. I encouraged her to call it Jenny V Consulting because I think it's a great memory catch. And since her focus in consulting is in sales, I figure, so that's what she's going to do. And today we're going to talk about the consulting business. We're going to talk about Jenny V Consulting, and we're going to talk about and even give you some tips on how you should do your sales planning. Now, we didn't talk about that part, did we, Jenny?
Well, it's fine. That's one of my favorite topics. So,
well, tell us about your favorite topic. What the heck? Here we are.
Yeah, well, Jenny V Consulting, I'm taking into consideration, but I will have a formal launch for a business. But the good news is, after moving on from my Chief Revenue Officer position in healthcare tech, I've had an opportunity to work within my network pretty quickly. So it's been busy, but great. And one of my passions is really helping organizations and B2B companies build process for sales at scale. And that means that there are a lot of sales trainers out there that do skills training and ongoing cultivation of those skills for the betterment of salespeople and performance. I tend to focus on the process elements that organizations need to scale. And that's really where my special sauce is and focus and passion. And that it means that really the full revenue stack is where I can have an influence, from the demand gen marketing efforts and go-to-market strategy and focus, to the SDR playbook development, to sales process development, forecast rigor, the way that our team is enabled to be successful selling our complex solutions, and then finally some influence on the customer success side, especially as it relates to expansion and upsell. So those are my passions. And
we're gonna drill down on just about every one of those at some point, I hope, during this conversation.
Yeah.
I will say that the way we met the very first time was you were running a lead generation company called Lead Gen. And then it circled back to where I spotted on LinkedIn that you were hanging up your shingle to move companies, in part, to move companies away from founder-based sales, which, as you know, I'm a founder-based sales guy. And so nothing would make me happier than to be able to bring on salespeople into this company. So, and I think you'll also remember very carefully that I warned you before you came to work here with us that the good news is we're a consulting firm. The bad news is we're a consulting firm. And just because we like to do things our way as consultants doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do it your way. And I hope we turned out to be a good client.
Of course.
If that's true, define that. And if it's not true, define that, please.
A good client for a consultant, I think more than anything, it's willing and a communicator. So a consultant's not going to be very successful if there's no willingness to participate or change from everyone who's involved. So that's really critical to ensure that there's buy-in and a willingness to consider trying things new and trying things slightly differently. But the other big part is communication. I think working with founders in particular, and that is one of my favorite stages, is working with founders who have been successful selling their solution and now want to replicate it, but they are the expert and everyone relies on them as an expert. So how do we enable expertise with other people who don't have that same longevity in a space? And that's really where my passion is, about developing process that'll do that. But when working with founders, what I need is founders who are willing to say, nope, I don't agree with that. And it's a give and a take, and not just, one voice coming to the table, but both voices. And that's something that I've really appreciated about working together. Is there have been times where we've not always seen eye to eye on a particular topic, but we talk through it and hash it out and figure out the right strategy forward for your business, because you know your business way better than I do.
And you win some and you lose some. I mean, there was a lot of good back and forth between us. I think, it's not an honor among thieves, but it is a respect among consultants that, because fortunately I do know what you do for a living, and I do know how, if it was going to go off the mark, I would have called it, but it never went off the mark. You're very good at what you do. And again, I will just stress that you were working for a professional consulting firm and building a whole new process. And by the way, we're also a business process design and management firm. So you've scoped it down even further into saying sales. I mean, sales is my scope.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the first things you and I talked about that we had to clarify up front, and thank you, by the way, I don't believe it was a billable experience, this one, was tell me what the hell you're talking about. What is GTM? What is, what are all those acronyms? And so throw some out that we should all know about. Like I just gave one up.
Yeah. Well, go-to-market is really that strategy of who am I going after in terms of, and so within that, there are a couple other acronyms, TAM and SAM, total addressable market. Yeah, total addressable market and sales addressable market. And so total addressable market is everyone that we could potentially sell to long-term reasonably. And that gets investors excited. It gets new team members excited when we understand and can sell a vision for our TAM and really what we're going after in terms of the potential growth of our company. But then we have to quickly distill that down into the SAM, which is our sales addressable market, which is really who we think we can sell to in the near term. So within that TAM, where are we going to focus? And that's the next piece that investors love to hear about, is the focus. Because a lot of times when founders see all the potential, and I've been in that seat too, it gets people excited, but also nervous because it's really hard to execute that broadly, successfully with a small team. So they want to see that the small team has really picked out their pie slice of who they're going to go after and try to build market share with, or pie slices.
Kind of like a restaurant. I've gone to many restaurants and I look at the menu and I thought, this menu is huge. How could they possibly cook all this food with any kind of quality? They should narrow it down. And so I know that we have, we're pretty horizontal in our consulting practice. How do you do that in the consulting practice? I mean, because you could go into just about any business in any industry and put together a process, because they're all customized. You have a formula, but you don't have templates. And
yeah. Well, I think it's who we speak to versus who comes our way. And that's the big thing, is where do we invest to go out and speak to that versus who naturally comes our way. I've had some very large companies reach out to me already, but that's not necessarily how I view my SAM for my consulting practice. I could work with anyone who has a sales team technically. So that would be my total addressable market. But where I see my sales addressable market is phases in B2B, mostly technology companies that are in either a seed to Series A round of funding, where they really have been doing predominantly founder-led sales and they don't have a sales process yet, is really where I want to message. That's where I want to go acquire business. I'm sure, and as I have already, I will continue to find other opportunities outside of that come my way. But in terms of what I'm going to intentionally message to and target, I'm going to go after companies that are very much at that phase.
And as we know, like in your engagement with us, we're half of a technology company, we're half of a service company.
Right.
And so, but we're always business process company. And so we're one of those firms that people say to me, okay, Bob, you're a technology company. How many employees do you have? And I know they're hoping to hear, I got 200 with plans to hire 600 more. When in reality, I could have, 75 contractors working for me and one employee and get more done with less angst. And so as business processes go, we learn how to break everything down to its most common denominator. But then as a service company goes, we're looking, as you know, to go into healthcare. That's where you came in. So you recognize that we're half service, half technology. It took us that direction. So good work. Good work for me. And I'm sure you know.
I hope it was. Yeah.
Well, you and I, we wouldn't be talking and smiling at each other if it was anything other than that.
True. Very true. Well, and I think that next phase of go-to-market is not just building that strategy, but that it's the alignment across the whole company and how quickly that can get off track when we have a broad solution and everyone kind of has an idea of like, oh, well, we could help these people, and then we could help these people, and how far away our vendors can get, our salespeople, our client success, when we're not really well aligned. And so that go-to-market strategy usually extends into an ideal customer profile and personas. And what I've seen in the past with personas is that there are these high-level, very demographic documents of like, this is Sally, she's the VP of sales, and she likes playing golf on Sundays. And it's not practical enough for people who are coming in to really understand the motivations of these individuals, what they're responsible for, how they're measured, and then how does the big connection is apply into our sales process. So how do we take those personas where we've got really detailed information about responsibilities, tie it to pain that they're feeling that connects to our solution and how our solution can address that pain, and then how we would build a business case around it. And then we see it extend into other things like shifts in our presentations, in our discovery, based on the fact that we have this really detailed persona and we understand who we're talking to, and how their needs might be different than the next person in this large organization. And that's something that I was really excited to work with you guys on, was to build that out so that there's a really good spot for consensus for everyone to come back to and get aligned and make sure that any investment that's made by your organization is more valuable.
Hey, here's one thing that I'm kind of like hoping too, is that since we were your first client or very close to your first client in this venture, that you picked up a few tips from us about how you could be a better consultant. Because as you know, being a consultant, it's like when you walk in a room, you say, I'm a consultant, you might as well say I'm a car salesman, I'm a telemarketer, I'm a, whatever. Which, by the way, I've been both. So, I'm not, nothing against either one of those. I'm proud to say I'm a telemarketer by trade. But, the fact is that there's a difference between being a professional consultant and being somebody who's in between opportunities. You chose the path of consulting. And so, so there's a business side of the business that a lot of people don't pay attention to. Your non-competes, your master service agreement, the scope of work agreement, the all that. Since we were kind of new, I didn't know that you'd have a lot of that done, but it seems like you're pretty complete in the paperwork. But what are the other things? If you're going to be a professional consultant, not that person in between opportunities. Yeah. Tell me about the commitment, because that's a big commitment to make. I mean, you left a pretty damn good position to do this.
Yes. And luckily I did have some experience as an entrepreneur. So betting on myself is something I've done in the past. And that takes some of the fear away. But it is, I'd say one of the challenges as a consultant is this element of delivering on work while also cultivating new work and making sure there's always time so that we don't face pitfalls. Being so early, I haven't faced that yet, but it's something that's pretty common. So, and there's always that pull. I also think with customers is that most customers, when they've had a good experience, immediately think, how could I bring this person on board? And so I have to have a really strong perspective there too, otherwise it gets confusing for everyone, and it's hard to work together because, if I don't have a clear path, then it's hard for other people to know how to interact with me. So I think that's been something that I've had to really learn over the years, having been a consultant before too. I've failed at that in the past, and I'm just really happy doing this work. I love working with so many different companies and seeing all of their different go-to-market strategies, and that really lights me up inside. And I get really excited, and I'm one of those weird people that can get excited about 90% of the ideas I'm seeing, and figure out and see that there's a path to success. So, yeah.
Well, when it's your second rodeo or sometimes third rodeo, what do they say? An entrepreneur will fail 5 times before they really succeed.
Right.
I hope that's true because this is my 5th shot. So although this one is 22 years old, so I think we'll make it.
I think you're in a good spot then. You've survived that long. You're fine.
Well, survive it, weather it, grow.
Yep.
One of the things that we're proud of, and it's good news, bad news for us. I mean, for any business really, is that we have no debt, and that's the bad news too, which means it restricts our ability to grow. But then again, at times like pandemics, show me a business that planned for that. We survived it and grew because we have no debt. Yeah. And in fact, we were able to invest more into our platform to make it more secure, tighter, so we took advantage of a couple of bad years in there and grew with them. And I bet you do the same thing. I bet you're going to be every bit as resilient. So,
well, thank you. I was very impressed with CustomerCount and your retention, and I won't speak to exact numbers because that's obviously proprietary, but I think it speaks volumes that even through a pandemic, that the average tenure of your customers and just how many years you've had great relationships with your customers is just really, really impressive, and speaks to the quality of your product, but your people as well. So that was really fun to get a little bit of a sneak peek into.
You're giving a shout out to Lisa Kobeck and Bill Morris. And I'm going to second that because I was talking to somebody that just this morning who, we were talking about the longevity of our customers and the retention rate on the technology side, on the survey business side.
Yep.
And I pointed out to him that if you're at a convention and you mention CustomerCount, if they say, "Oh, Lisa Kobeck," you'll know they're a client. If they say Bob Kobeck, you'll know they're not. So, so that's the the retention part though. And what's real important about that, I mean, all kidding aside, is that we have a very clear delineation between marketing and selling. Between selling and operations. No proposal goes out the door here, particularly on the technology side, that doesn't go through operations first. They have to buy off on everything that goes out the front door because they're dealing with it when it comes to the back door.
Yeah.
And so
that
great. Means that, as we're going through our sales process, one of the things we do is we try to set expectations really early in the expectation. You're going to love what happens. Everybody talks about the level of customer service, but we can prove it. Hey, we just won a big award from the Better Business Bureau for that.
I saw that. Congrats.
Yeah, the torch.
Well, cool. I think you bring up a great point. There are a lot of organizations that is something that has to be addressed in sales process, is how do we set expectations for what will be experienced on the other side. And I'll tell a quick story about this because it relates to a founder, and a founder I was able to do some mentoring and coaching with. And when we were talking one day, she was expressing how overwhelmed she was, and that she had big customers coming on, and she was grateful, but she was concerned about the impact it was having on her team and how quickly they had to start. And when we actually unpacked that and started to ask questions around it, it was, well, why do they have to start the next day after the signed contract? Where is that expectation coming from? And would you lose the business if you adjusted those expectations and start date after all of this time, this whole process? would they wait 15 or 30 days for your team to be in a position to be as successful as possible implementing? So what does it need to look like for your team to be best enabled and not feel like they're overwhelmed and overworked? And let's build that vision.
Setting those expectations internally is every bit as setting the expectations externally.
That was a big deal at Lead Gen back in the day. We found that we were always scrambling, and it was partially my fault, if not entirely my fault as the CEO, because I ran a lot of the sales processes. And same thing, I felt this pressure and obligation to start when we changed that as just an organizational policy and a commitment to each other to say, this is what it's going to look like when we start a project. This is the window we're going to have to get ready and make sure we have the right people and have them aligned in the right way and launch with all of the steps we need to achieve successfully. Then it became a lot easier, and customers walked down that path with us without problem.
You got to watch. You got to watch the cadence and the volume and the, and also realize that inside there's if you've got a good process internally, I mean, if you practice what you preach, one of the things that we're able to do is help manage the ebb and the flow. So, because a client, you never know. I mean, we had a client a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago that came in and actually tripled their engagement with us and needed it quickly. So with a good process, you should be able to accommodate that.
Right. It's a lot easier to accommodate a current customer.
If two of them would have come in and done that, we'd have been a deep yogurt.
Yeah. Well, it's hard conversations and expectation setting. And the other thing that I'm really passionate about just broadly in sales process, but skill set, is that we have to go at hard conversations as founders, as consultants, and be brave about those and put the topic on the table and be willing to work through it and point at it and pick it up and look at it and analyze it. But that also is a key element to being successful in sales. The salespeople that go address red flags and put those hard topics on the table early are the ones that win. It makes better leaders, it makes better client success people. So the bravely handling and addressing and going at hard topics, I feel like is one of those intangible skills that really sets people apart in their ability to go derive success long term.
I love that. Brave, be brave, be brave, be bold, be whatever it takes, but believe, you like you pointed out way earlier, that this is not the first time you bet on yourself. And I love that. I think that's a great way to describe an entrepreneur. If you're afraid to bet on yourself, don't be one. So let's see, one more point before we move on to one of my very favorite topics. And that is that when we talked about the ideal customer, what I believe the same thing you do, they're going to listen, they're going to pay attention to what I'm saying. And they're going to compensate me based on what I point out to them is they wouldn't be bringing in if there wasn't somebody that they needed to take a bullet. And so, you want me to take the bullet in my shoulder, in the knee, those are two different prices, but that makes them a good client when they're honest with me.
Yeah.
That's to your point. They're good communicators and they're honest and they communicate up front what's the real pain, what's the real problem, where do you need it fixed? And oftentimes we're the guys that if it ain't broke, we break it. But I noticed just like you, we're the same way, that the fact that they pay their invoices on time is a second, maybe even a distant third from being the ideal client.
I really think that's reflective. It's something that I usually ask about even when I've been in an interview process. Just what are vendors treated like, and how are they treated, is really reflective of the business. So that was one thing in my past that felt very out of control in some elements of lead gen with one of my partners, that was not aligned to some of my core beliefs about how to treat people. But I think that is a really key element of, if we're paying people on time because they're doing good work, respecting their net terms, that's the right way to treat people to continue to have a long-standing relationship.
That is a little trick, I guess you'd call it, or a tip that I used. I started doing it 20 years ago when companies would ask me for references. I'd give them two good references, business references, but I would always include a vendor
Mhm.
in that list of references, because I agree. How do you treat people?
Yep.
So as a reminder, Jenny, to you and to anybody that might be smart enough to be watching this, the last couple of minutes of every podcast is spent talking about a charity of choice for that wonderful
Mhm.
person that took the time to talk to us. And in this case, this is Jenny's charity of choice. As soon as we're off of this Bobcast, I'm going to jump online and I'll make sure that I'm the first $50 bill to be
Nice.
contributed as a result of your spending your time and as a way of saying thank you. And tell us about NeuroHope. What got you there? What's up with this?
Yeah, I definitely have a passion for NeuroHope. I've been blessed to serve as the board chair now. So during my tenure, I've been a board member for 6 years, almost 7 now. And NeuroHope was founded by a person that I know in kind of my life and connections of friends. Chris Liu, Leeuw is the founder. And Chris is the brother of a friend of mine from high school, and a really active guy, was into journalism and just had a really cool background. And he was going down to Blues Canoes in Columbus with friends. At the end of Blues Canoes, there's a bridge, and it's like a popular thing to jump off the bridge into the water. And someone jumped right after him, landed on him, and broke his neck. He was essentially a quadriplegic. He almost drowned. He was rescued and saved, but went through this journey of recovery. And he self-describes it as feeling like a floating head on a pillow for a good amount of time. But what's interesting is the insurance model. As soon as someone's in this recovery and they taper, it's not that they decline, it's that they taper in their results at all. That's when insurance says you're near the end of your recovery, you've gained what you're going to gain. Now you're kind of out on your own to just do physical therapy and adjust to your new life. And it's jarring and shocking. Well, Chris actually worked for Scott Jones at the time. And it's my understanding that Scott helped to fund him going out to Utah to a specialty clinic, that he went out there in a wheelchair and came back walking because he had extended time for recovery. That doesn't happen for everyone. But Chris came back really passionate about, how do I serve this group of people who need a safe place to be active? They need a community of people to connect with. They need ongoing physical therapy because their bodies have fundamentally changed, and they need people that understand that. And they still want to continue to potentially make progress on their healing and recovery. And he built NeuroHope to solve that need and that gap. Once insurance is running out and once they're ready to move them out of a rehabilitation clinic, NeuroHope is their place to go. I can't say exactly what happened this year because I don't think it's been a public announcement yet, but Chris has done a phenomenal job building this clinic. They serve, gosh, I'm trying to think how many patients annually.
Where's the clinic?
It's out on Pendleton Pike on the northeast side.
In Indianapolis.
It is in Indianapolis. Yep. So he's a social entrepreneur here in Indianapolis that's doing really cool work. He's gotten a state a law or funding passed that then he had to go apply for and win, which he has won multiple times, which are grants from the state to support this kind of work. He's won some really large grants that haven't been announced yet. So he's just done a phenomenal job leading this. And I'm just super passionate about it because I've been able to see some of the stories and experiences of patients that have been through there.
That's always the heart grabbers when you see people, when they come in and you see them when they leave 3 months later,
Yep.
6 months, or whatever, that time is.
Mhm.
That's I'm involved with a couple charities that mostly on little kids, and some of them can't
Mhm.
walk, and they come in and they leave running, and it's just it
Mhm.
yanks at your heart. So if you've got any kind of a heart at all, and you understand what can happen to people with injuries like this, go over there and
Mhm.
contribute some money, big money, give them big money, big dollars. I'm going to give them $50, you give them 500. So, and Jenny, obviously, she bills by the hour, and so any hour that she's putting into NeuroHope is an expensive hour. So,
Well, it's been a lot of fun to be involved, and I'm proud to be in the leadership and excited for how we're building succession and more governance, and it's been a lot of fun.
well, I think it's so cool. I'm grateful that you took your time today.
Thanks for
Um,
having me.
and let's see, you and I, we're not even done yet. We've got some more stuff we're going to do together. We're going to renew our agreement with you, which I'm happy to do. I think
Yay.
it's cool. It's been great to work with you, and I've had a lot of fun today. And every time I talk to you, I learn something new. So let's keep talking for sure.
Of
And
course.
maybe we'll get together again and have another bottle of wine, and we'll talk even more.
Sounds good. I'd love that. Thanks for having
Oh,
me today.